Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for joining the DPS Exceptional Children's Department and the Durham Special Needs Advisory Council on our fourth educational series for self-advocacy for students. I'm Jessica Gunn. I'm currently the secretary for the Durham Special Needs Advisory Council, and we hope you find this session beneficial. We have a group of panelists here who will answer a series of questions, sharing their knowledge on this topic. Feel free to place your comments in the chat box, and our panelists' comments or questions, and our panelists respond to as many as time will allow. I will now turn it over to Ms. Sheena Johnson-Cooper, who is our moderator.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gunn, and good afternoon to our Durham and DPS community. We are thrilled to have you this afternoon as we talk about self-advocacy for our students, our EC students. And again, just jumping right into our questions because we have quite a few that we need to address today. I'll start with Ms. Krista Saunders. How is self-advocacy taught and supported with students in the school setting?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Krista Saunders. I'm the EC Director of Special Programs and Behavior Support. We work a lot with self-advocacy, starting with elementary right on up through high school. We're going to work a lot on this through our social skills avenues, helping students meet their competencies regarding social awareness, responsible decision-making, being able to advocate for their needs. First and foremost, being able to identify what their needs are, and then being able to advocate for them. So we do that a lot through social skills instruction throughout their school career within Durham Public Schools. We have a lot of different resources around social skills curriculums, a lot of staff who are trained in teaching social skills, school counselors, EC teachers, our general education teachers are implementing social skills instruction. So we work a lot with students throughout the day to target their areas of need. Some opportunities for students with disabilities to advocate for themselves during the school day and school year are all throughout their classes. Teachers are constantly supporting students and seeing what they need, and students are encouraged to advocate for what they may need, and teachers can help them advocate as they're seeing students who need different things and putting that into terms that they can utilize and understand, and possibly adding those things to their IEP.
Thanks so much for that. Can you share some additional examples of what that looks like?
So we may have students who we see who, when the classroom gets loud, might cover their ears. And so we may help the student advocate for headphones to see if that would be appropriate accommodation to meet the student's needs around that. We may have students who might say when they receive an assignment, this looks like a lot. This looks like too much, and how can we help the student advocate for how that assignment can be better presented to support their learning style and their learning needs, and looking at making those modifications to the IEP to add those accommodations as needed. So from the very beginning, we're supporting students in helping them recognize what they need, and then helping them quantify and advocate for that as they get older.
Wonderful. It seems like there are a lot of supports there to help our students. Piggybacking off of that, is there a platform for the student to share their feedback about their plan throughout the school year? And a secondary question, how do they ask for services or tools that they need?
Yeah, so there's always the formal platform of the IEP meeting, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Informally, students can ask their teachers every day for what they need. We have students who will advocate sometimes for things that they don't need. You know, if teachers recommend accommodation or a strategy and the student may say, nah, that doesn't work for me, but this works for me. Or we may have a teacher recognize that something works for one student that doesn't work for another, and making sure that we're supporting students in advocating for that throughout the day. So just all day long, every day, the role of our teachers, particularly our EC teachers, is to recognize the needs of students and make sure they have what they need to be successful. And then along those lines, they're helping students also recognize what they need, and then being able to advocate that as they learn and grow.
Fantastic. It seems like there's a wonderful partnership between providers and our teachers and our students and their families. But for those who may have additional challenges, in particular communication challenges such as speech, hearing impairment, or they may not speak English, what do you use to assist them to help them communicate better during this process?
Yes, so we have lots of services that students can access, everywhere from ESL services to assistive technology to speech and language. And so we're making sure through the IEP process that students have the supports and tools that they need. So whether or not a student requires an evaluation to receive a specific assistive technology device, or whether we just need to schedule an interpreter to be at the IEP meeting or in the classroom, all of those supports and services are done through that IEP process, which we're gonna talk about a little more. But making sure too that when a student is participating in an IEP meeting, that they have those services, that we already have scheduled an interpreter or whatever may be needed to support that student during that meeting.
Thank you. I think this is the perfect segue to talk more about that IEP meeting and how we are preparing students for meetings. So I'm going to shift to two additional representatives from our EC department to talk a little bit more about that process. So our first question, and this is for Ms. Vavrusek or Ms. Burns, how are students empowered to participate in the IEP meeting? And there's a second part to that question as well. Is there an age minimum before they are able to participate? And lastly, the third part of this question, how are we making sure to incorporate the students' needs from the student's perspective into these IEP meetings?
Thanks, Ms. Cooper. So I'm Wendy Vavrusek. I am the Elementary Exceptional Children's Director. And so I'll start with our younger age students and then toss over to my secondary counterpart to speak more to what happens, when they're approaching middle school and high school ages. But I did want to also piggyback on some of the items that Ms. Saunders was referring to when we talk about students' needs and advocacy, and maybe perhaps sometimes they're unable to necessarily articulate those things, either because developmentally they're not there yet, or they don't have the language to communicate that. And so that's where our teachers and those experts working with a child sometimes have to observe and draw conclusions. And sometimes we have to attempt and try things and collect the data as a result of those implementation to see if those are successful things to help support the students in learning to communicate their needs or their desires for whether it has to do with academic skills or social interactions with students. And so we also want to hear from parents, because we know parents are seeing their children in different environments than we are. So they might see them at the park or in a play group or in an after school type activity or a sport. And so how that child engages and advocates there is also an opportunity to build on or to work together to streamline so that the things that they do get applied in all those different environments for repetition and for practice opportunities, et cetera. But back to specifically advocating, as Ms. Saunders was talking about, we build on that through social skills and peer interactions and teacher interactions as they're young and developing. In my opinion, there's not necessarily a minimum age at which a student can engage in their IEP. There are some specifics where we must have a student have an opportunity in engaging in their IEP process. But when we talk about that, elementary age students can be involved in that process and be involved in their meetings. It really comes down to what are they comfortable with? Sometimes it depends on how comfortable they are being in maybe a group, and maybe there's a period of time in an IEP meeting that's appropriate for them to participate in, or perhaps they're not comfortable being with maybe people they're not as most familiar with who might be at that table, but would feel comfortable speaking with their specific special education.
Muted.
Ms. Vavrusek, I'm sorry. I think your sound cut out and we may have missed you there.
Muted me. I don't know how long you all were without my voice. So when a child is not comfortable going to an IEP meeting, they can certainly work with their parent and or their special education teacher to communicate their what helps them or what they think they need. And their voice can be represented by that adult in that meeting too, if they're not physically comfortable being there or emotionally comfortable being there. But some children I've seen elementary age children, particularly around 4th and 5th grade. I've seen more children actually participate for some period of time in their meetings. And certainly Stacy can speak to middle and high school, but we encourage them to be there if they're comfortable doing so.
Hi, and I'm Stacy Burns. I'm the EC director for secondary schools. And as Ms. Beverusik just talked about, there's no minimum, right? There's elementary, if they're able to participate, they can definitely be a part of their meetings, but the state and federal policy states that at the age of 14, the student must be invited to their IEP meeting. And so that can take on different forms. And then just everything that Ms. Saunders said about self-advocacy, those are the things from elementary through middle school to high school that actually supports with them being able to come to the IEP meetings and be prepped. So one of the ways they participate is it could be a variety of ways. They could participate in the meeting by coming for just certain parts like goals and objectives, right? Or they could stay for the entire meeting. They could speak directly to their strengths and their needs. They can add to the present, like review the present level, add to the present levels. Accommodations and modifications, that's where students really talk about, you can see them pump up in IEP meetings where they talk about what they actually need, which will then carry off into their post-secondary, like whether it be job, going to employment or college. But we just want to make sure that their voices at that age, if they participate or not, whether they are a part of the IEP development, we definitely want to have that student involved in the process, whether it be before, during, or even after, right? Reviewing that information so they know what's expected and what they're supposed to receive. We definitely want children to be a part of that process when they're ready, and also by the required age of 14.
Thank you so much. And I think you touched on it a little bit, but I'm going to throw another question, perhaps drill down a little bit deeper. How does the school or the IEP team prepare the student to participate in the IEP meeting?
And that's a really good question. And so I'll let Wendy start with elementary, and then we'll work our way up because it does get more intensive, if you will, as they approach that post-secondary life. So I'll let Wendy start first.
So I think this is one of those things where, depending on the skills and the understanding of a child, to what extent they can understand what's occurring in their day. I think it's important for children to understand that there is a reason why perhaps learning or other things are hard for them. So to the degree that you can have conversations about that, you can begin discussing that there's this plan and you're working with me to help work on those skills. And you are being transparent with them about them spending time with them to work on specific skills to improve and get better. So when you lay that out on the front end with a student to help them understand, again, at a level that's appropriate for them, then you can start to work on hey, I'm going to be going to a meeting. And you maybe have, as a special education teacher, one of those conversations when you're asking the parent for their the vision and concerns that the parent has for their child. That's also a place to be talking about, have you had conversations with your own child? What are they expressing to you? And that's also a place to have a conversation about, to what degree do you want your child to be involved in the meeting, as well as a special education teacher, and I'm having a conversation with this particular child that I work with. Hey, we're going to be having a meeting. We're going to be working on developing a new plan. And these are some of the areas that we're looking at working in. Here's what I know. Here's all the great things and the good things that you're strong with. Let's talk about what we need to work on and start to get some understanding of the child's perspective of what's hard for them. Sometimes we see in elementary school, we see sometimes behavior manifest because maybe there's a skill missing or they're struggling with an academic skill. So sometimes a way to deflect that is in behaviors because they don't want to appear that they don't know how or can't do something. So it's always a place to start talking about how the degree to which they want to work on, what they should work on, and how we build to do that. There's also different inventories, if you will, to understand what their interests are and how to start utilizing their interests to build on their weaknesses or the skill deficits. And that gets a little bit more involved and more detailed as you go towards the secondary level.
So thank you, Wendy. And I will go into as the children get older, right? And they're really understanding like the IEP. And so one of the things we do and should continue to do is discuss the purpose of the meeting with the student beforehand. Let them know it's an IEP meeting. What does all of that entail? What will we be talking about? Then the other part is really going over the IEP with the student, reviewing the student's IEP, going over the student's progress, talking about goals, getting their input in the IEP. And I'd always say input like their voice. So you want to make sure that the student's voice is heard. But you also want to make sure, like in that process, you're talking about what the IEP meeting format is, right? We talk about, who's going to be at the meeting, right? Which teachers, the administrator, parents, who's going to be there and what does that look like? And then going back to the self-advocacy piece, all of the training that goes into from elementary all the way up to middle and high school, teaching the self-advocacy skills, social emotional skills, how to ask and answer appropriate questions. And you kind of do that naturally in a structured environment, but you also encourage children to, if, something didn't go right in class, coaching them on how to, draft the email or talk with the teacher, but also providing the support and coaching during the meeting. We talked about if children, non-English speakers, or when we talk about children who may be younger or may not be able to communicate, communicate on their own, you coach the student and give them the words to say. And so you really want to start the process as early as possible, like elementary, and then continue to reinforce that through middle and high school. So by the time they're required to come to the IEP meetings, they really have an understanding. But one of the biggest pieces that we do want to address with for prepping in the IEP meeting is, like Wendy said, is looking at their interests, doing interest inventories. At the secondary level, it gets more involved with transition, and that will determine what's their post-secondary outcomes, whether it's college, employment, or just college or employment, and then independent living skills, which self-advocacy is really a big piece of independent living skills because it's all about that decision-making, and that's going to affect them on their job and whether in school. So really want to make sure children understand from beginning, from A to Z, before the meeting, the planning, what's the format, who's going to be there, and actually being able to self-advocate and having that coach alongside them, which could be the EC teacher, the counselor, but someone there to support them.
Thank you. And I think you both probably touched on this a bit, but certainly want to circle back to this from an elementary and a secondary level. What accommodations are made to help the student understand what's happening in the meeting. I know we talked a lot about the prep to get them ready for the meeting, but while we're actually in the meeting, what accommodations are made to help them understand the dialogue and conversation?
So I would say that particularly with elementary children, you're going to be doing a lot of conversation, or you're potentially having that conversation with that student ahead of the meeting. I would say that the tendency is far fewer elementary children are going to be in their IEP meetings. And if they are present in the IEP meeting, it should be probably for a finite period of time and at a certain point in the meeting. I think there are conversations that might need to happen, even for students in high school, that may not be appropriate to be had in the presence of the student, depending on what the concerns are. And so it's a matter of time of perhaps being very intentional and scheduling those. And so if you know that a child is going to join or student is going to join during that certain period of time, that there's some coaching to prepare the student for, if they're coming in person to that meeting, who's going to be there, so that they're not overwhelmed by walking in and maybe there's a room full of people, because those meetings can sometimes have a number of people at them. So identifying that there may be people in the room that they may not be familiar with, and that we would do introductions for them so that they know who's there. And that if they ultimately get there, especially if they're an elementary age kid and suddenly they go, I don't think I want to do this. Again, there's an advocacy moment, right, that we want to reinforce. And so that's prepping them to say, if you get there, yeah, I know you want to right now, but if you get there and you decide, I don't think I want to do this, it's okay to say that. I think they just need to be empowered to use their voice to tell us what they need. And I think when you're surrounded by a room full of adults, that can be very intimidating for our younger children. And so, and even our older children for that matter. But I do think that we need to honor their voice in that moment and recognize what they can say. If they seem a little bit on the edge, we can say, well, are you able to tell us what you want this team to think about? And then if they can, I think those are also preparations we can do ahead of the meeting, like help them craft a list of what's going well for me, maybe things I need from people. And so that they have something that they can rely on and not just kind of call it out from their memory. What are some tools that I, as a teacher, can help the student prepare and bring to their meeting to help them be able to say what they need to say. And then if ultimately they can't do that, then at least you have maybe the list that they wrote that's in their writing and can be used for the record. And that's the start, it's the baby steps. Where do you start and what are they capable of doing at that particular point? And that's where you build from. And so I think, we want them to feel confident in being able to say what they know. I've worked with very young children, birth to 5 for a number of years too. And part of where I come from in that world is also to help children be able to say, when they come and say, so-and-so hit me, or something, this happened to me by someone else, is to ask them, did you like it? Because we know that as an adult, they probably didn't like it. That's why they're telling you. And so we want to help give them a voice to say, well, tell them you didn't like that. And then as the adult, you can help facilitate that exchange between those children to help them, again, navigate things that they don't like that happen to them. Or when somebody does something that they don't like, then there's a place for that person for reparations or what have you. So again, it can start very young. Like I said, we've done this as young as 1, 2, 3-year-olds. So I know we can do it with our school age population, but it is a matter of time of how we focus and how we choose to ask the young child to think about what happened and make decisions for themselves. I think is where we get to helping them learn early on about how to advocate. And then they feel comfortable being able to say what they need as they age, as long as we have built that in the earlier years.
Ms. Burns, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I just think just piggybacking off of Wendy, it's attending the IEP meeting could look different for all kids. And so there are some even older kids who high school level, they want no parts of being in front of people. So we encourage like Wendy said, writing it down, reviewing the IEP with them and making sure that their voice is there, or offering just sit next to me and, I'll be your voice and coach you along, into where they come in just for the goals and objectives, or they'll come in just for, to give their strength and needs. So it really depends on, and then some stay for the entire meeting. And we're encouraging them at an age in like older, like 10th, 11th, and 12th grade to run your meetings if possible, because it does give them that skill that they're going to need post-secondary. So for me, the biggest piece is getting kids when they're older, 16 older, and even if they're 14 to 15, but really 16 and older, to run their own IEP meetings.
Thank you. Fantastic. And one more question, and it can go to either one of you. We talk a lot about what the school and the support team and the staff do to help prepare the students for their IEP meetings, but what can parents do to help support their students for those upcoming meetings as well?
And so I would just say the same as what the school team can do. Parents are the most, children lean to their parents. And so start off discussing the purpose of the meeting. Like, why are we meeting for you? Like what we'll be discussing. Also encourage your child to express their thoughts, whether it be verbally or whether it be just writing it down and writing a statement to the team, right, that they can read and prepare. Definitely. And then encouraging them through the meeting to speak up. It's okay. But then also after the IEP meeting is over, having that conversation again with them, just to review it, to make sure their thoughts, their concerns were addressed as well. And then if there's some follow-up that's needed, helping them to craft, whether it be an email or scheduling a meeting with the team again, to go over some of those additional concerns.
The only thing I would add to that is I think that there's, again, the advocacy is building on over time, not necessarily for one particular meeting, right? We want them to learn how to apply the skills wherever they are, whether it's with us in school, in a workplace setting, maybe church, wherever. And so I think there's always that working on how do you get a concern addressed if something is not going your way or something that you're trying isn't working. And so again, building on that capacity of, I'm a person you can bring that to, and we'll talk about that. And it might be something that comes by way of being addressed through the delivery of their services and their goals and objectives, depending on what those are specifically about. Or it could be a particular incident that you're going to debrief about and make a plan for how to take the next step to get to where you're trying to go or to get resolution on something. So I think we want to look beyond the scope of just an IEP meeting preparation, which I think is the whole purpose of the advocacy skills in general. But again, to me, it's not limited to or sequestered to an age range. Like it can start early on, depending on just some little things that we can do or say, or how we respond to students as they develop in their younger years, that builds those skills innately.
Thank you so much. This afternoon, we are very fortunate to have members of ECAC, some representatives from that organization here with us to share some additional information. Mr. Pickens and Ms. Warren, thank you so much for being here. I do want to give you an opportunity to let our audience know what ECAC is, because there may be some families out there who are unfamiliar with your services.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Billy Pickens, and I am ECAC's Youth Outreach Coordinator, as well as a self-advocate with a disability myself. And a little bit of backstory. So ECAC stands for the Exceptional Children's Assistance Center. We've been around since the 80s. Obviously, I haven't been around that long, but we empower families and improve lives. And it's North Carolina's Parent Training and Information Center. So we mainly communicate with parents. We help parents as really as Wendy and Stacey were talking about with IEPs, all those things, self-advocacy, and really helping them empowering them, we like to say, to advocate for their child. So we may not advocate for them, but putting them in that position to advocate. So and we don't do legal advice, but we will point parents in the right direction to get help in all areas. We will attend IEP meetings with them as well. But as for me, I'm the youth outreach coordinator. So recently, ECAC's really started to really notice and pick up on the importance of valuing and empowering the youth voice. And so we created a youth advisory team, which is consisted of young people with disabilities across the state of North Carolina from ages 14 to 26. I've had that for about 4 years. And the idea is to help them be in positions to advocate for themselves and feel that their voice matters. And I can't remember which one of you said it, but somebody mentioned sometimes them being intimidated by being in those positions and being in those places. And that's definitely something that we help them overcome and try to empower them to overcome and make them realize that, there's a lot that they can benefit from sharing their story and sharing their voice. So we do webinars with them. Like I said, we can't go to IEP meetings with them. We do different summits and in-person events and offer them to share what they want to do, especially, and I really love what you also touched on about post-secondary, because that's really what we prepare them for. Some of them are in school, some of them are not, but we really try to prepare them for that life after high school. And we also recently created a junior youth advisory team for young people that are younger, because we realize the importance and need for that. And we have young people on that team ages 10 to 13. And we do a lot of the same things, but they're really inspiring because they want to speak. They want to share their story, but they just have to know that people are listening. And so we try to give them that platform. So I don't know if you had anything to add, but that's a bit of an overview of what we do.
Yeah, so my name is Maya Warren, and I have a multiplicity of roles in and outside of ECAC. I am a board member, secretary of the ECAC's board, in addition to being a member of the youth advisory team as a liaison and a co-facilitator of the junior youth advisory team, in addition to the producer and editor for the Exceptional Experience podcast, which is youth and young adult led by those of us with disabilities. And so I think one of the main things, as I was listening, you all were talking about that big T transition period. And, ECAC has done a lot of work, especially now partnering with Disability Inclusion North Carolina and vocational rehabilitation for the STAR program, which is a pre-ETS program that's designed to equip students with disabilities with the tools necessary to have whatever a successful transition looks like for their individuals.
Thank you both so very much. And you both touched on services and other offerings of ECAC, but are there any specific services or supports that your organization offers related to student self-advocacy?
So one of the things that Billy alluded to was the youth advisory team. So I've been a member for a couple years now, and that specific avenue creates several opportunities. So we have an event held quarterly called North Carolina's Got Talent. And it's an event that, young folks with disabilities from 4 to 26 can submit whatever their talent may be. So we've had visual artists, we've had music artists, we've had, a couple doing ballroom dancing. We've had people, do poems and art
songs,
write songs. And through that, it's giving, I don't think people realize the power of using whatever you're gifted in to self-advocate. That's a big component of my story. And one of the things I tell parents is pay attention. Pay attention to what your child, regardless of ability level, gravitates to, because 9 times out of 10, that's going to be the thing that helps refine their self-advocacy. It's going to, because I know one personal experience, as a public communicator on a global, national, state, and local level, a lot of the things that I did growing up around spoken word, art, literature, creativity. Those are the things that I get to use every day and show up in. And so while I might not have a traditional occupation, those gifts have helped, in a sense, make room for me and provided the opportunity for me to share some of the things I navigate as a person with multiple disabilities, and most of them being invisible. So that's one program. We also have the IEP, the Youth Exceptional Perspectives newsletter, that both the JYAT and the YAT get to contribute to. And sometimes we open it up to folks all over the state because it provides yet another opportunity to self-advocate. And one of the things we've really been focusing on is really involving everyone in these in-person events. So we did a panel at ECU's Inclusion Summit last year. And so several of us from the youth advisory team got to be involved and share our stories, in our full selves in those moments, and the response from special educators and government officials and administrators, was resounding and supportive. So we're working to kind of equip parents and families with the tools so that whether you're on the youth advisory team or the junior youth advisory team or not, you have tools that start at home that can help you matriculate through transition.
Yes,
Mr.
so we also have our Maya kind of alluded to it earlier, but we have the Exceptional Experience podcast where it started just me and Maya, and normally sometimes it's just the two of us, and we discuss disability related topics, self-advocacy related topics. We discuss our own personal experiences. Shameless plug is on the ECAC YouTube channel. Definitely go check it out. But we also have times when we do have other youth on. So we have youth from our team on. We just have youth throughout the community that we know with disabilities, and we allow them to share their story. And we say, you can talk about whatever you want to talk about. It doesn't have to be disability related, it has to be self-advocacy, but really get them thinking about, what are you beyond your disability? What are your goals? What are your dreams? What do you want to do? And we let them know our stories as well, because yes, we're self-advocates, but we're also, like Maya was mentioning, she's a musician and an artist. And, as for me, I really enjoy, the work that I do, as well as podcasting with her. And so we want young people to really get thinking about, what are you beyond your disability and how can you best advocate for yourself to have the best possible experience. And we also, even within our own youth advisory team, recently we've been really trying to lean more into allowing them to be leaders. And I know that one that really helped me personally when I was growing up, because yes, I was definitely intimidated being in a room full of adults that I didn't know where they had my best interest, didn't know who I could trust. But one thing that really helped me was people empowering me to be a young leader, and people empower me to say, hey, Billy, what do you think about this? How about you do this? I see you're really in focusing on my strengths and what I'm capable of doing. And that was when I found my passion and love for speaking and public speaking with to others. And so I think we try in our youth advisory team to allocate tasks. So we have someone who's really good at Googling things, and so we allow her to do that. We have plenty of musicians in the team, so we have them, show us their music. We have people we have one that's a really good timekeeper and are really, really good at, keeping things in order. So we have him lead. Even though I'm the main leader, I always give it to him. And even in the JYAT, we try to allocate tasks. And so that's really important, even no matter how young they are, really getting them to realize that they are leaders and that they are capable of doing something and that they are more than what their disability is. And so we really try to bring that out of them in a big way and at an early age.
Fantastic. For families who want to engage more with ECAC, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
So you can connect with us through our website. Oh man, I wish I had something I put in the chat, but you can connect with us through our website. You can call our numbers on the website, ecacparencenter.org. We have our phone number there as well, and you can connect one of our parent educators. And you can also connect with me. My emails is wpickens@ecacmail.org. So you connect with us that way. And And so, yeah, there's definitely plenty of ways, but mainly through our website as well as our YouTube channel. And so we have multiple ways to connect with us.
And I put the link to the website in the chat for whoever wants to distribute that.
Wonderful. Thank
Cool.
you both so much.
Mhm.
Looking back at our questions, I think we've had one come in, and I'm going to pose this to the larger group, and anyone feel free to jump in. How do you manage a disagreement between a student and a parent or a teacher about the student's requested needs?
If I may, I would like to chime in just as a
Go
young
for it.
adult with disabilities. And the reason I say that is because sometimes there's a psychology behind it that most people don't understand. You have the parent who is advocating alongside their child the best way they can. And that in and of itself brings up emotions when you have traumatic history navigating school systems and medical institutions. And then you have the child. In a lot of cases, we're seeing kids who haven't been given the autonomy to self-advocate. So the parents doing all of the work. And I heard someone mentioning like involving them in the IEP, but sometimes they don't want to take that invitation. A lot of that's because they haven't been given that autonomy. Oh, like, hey, I'm going to let you try and call the doctor today. So there's a lot of emotion and tension behind that as well that kind of leads to this sense of learned helplessness. Well, mommy and daddy's got it, so I don't need to say anything. And we're seeing how that contributes to a lot of issues with Big T transition, because before you know it, I'm sure we all can remember hitting 18 and being like, wow, that went by really fast. Imagine how much more detrimental it is as a child or an adult with a disability when you hit that age of 18 and you're like, what the heck am I going to do now? So you have the parent and the child aspect in the dynamic, and then you have teachers. With the advent of the pandemic, education has been way down and bogged down more than ever. So teachers are having to do more than just teach. And a lot of them are teaching with less resources than when they first started. So you have this, what I like to call anxiety. Last night I was on another panel and someone was like, I didn't consider that I need to think about the environment when we're putting programs and whatnot together for people with disabilities. And I could hear the stress in her voice, because when someone brings that up, they usually hear, oh, this is another thing I got to figure out. And so from a disagreement standpoint, one of the missing pieces to resolving disagreements is we're not on the same page. We all want the same things, but we're not communicating in a way that alludes to the fact that we all have a shared desire to see this student become successful, this teacher to achieve an outcome, and this parent to have peace about the direction their child is going in. And so we're all coming from different perspectives, but we desire the same outcome. So that's where a lot of disagreements stem from, because we're communicating differently the same thing. And so if we can develop a language around, okay, as a teacher, how can I help? This is what I'm saying when I mean this. And literally pulling back the layers of emotion, because sometimes emotion in and of itself can help, but also can be a hindrance. Like I remember being in one of my first IEP meetings and heard all these adults just talking around me, but they were talking about me and not to me. So in that moment, I kind of had to make a choice. Now, in my own history, I've always had to figure a lot of things out, but in that moment, I had to make a choice. Like, am I going to allow them to talk for me and not include me in the thing that's about me, or am I going to raise my hand? But a lot of kids struggle to make that decision. So recognizing that you, as much as you want to present an idea, as much as you want the best, also be cognizant of maybe some of the barriers that prevent people from receiving help and receiving services and responding in a way that could be beneficial.
I think Maya hit the nail on the head. I think really focusing on the outcome, because at the end of the day, we all, and I definitely have had experiences in my own IEP meetings where, my mom had certain dreams for me and I had a different vision. And I as a student, I had to stand up and say, hey, I respect what you want. And that is the thing. And I would say as students as well, I don't know if there are any students on the call, but I would say, be respectful of your parents. I know that sometimes it's very difficult, especially when you're of a certain age. And I definitely have been there where I was like, why are they so difficult? Why can't they just understand me? But no, we all want the same outcome. They want you to be happy. You want to be happy. And so I think it's important to really focus on the outcome and say, hey, I respect you. I respect what you want of me. And I appreciate that. But I want the same outcome as you do. And I believe that I can do this. And Miles really touched on something that, really resonated with me as well, is really starting small. Like I said earlier, really starting small and because sometimes parents are just, they're worried. They don't know, if I send my kid out here, are they going to succeed? Or are they going to be okay? And I get, my therapist said yesterday something that really resonated with me. Sometimes your parents and grandparents are only as happy as their child or grandchild. And so they want to see them succeed. And so it's important that they realize they can do the small things. They have a good support system around them. And most parents, I can't speak for everybody, but I think a lot of parents will say, hey, that may not be me what I wanted from my child, but I can respect and understand that. And I can feel comfortable knowing they're going to be successful with that. So really focusing on the outcome and not always just, the ins and outs of it.
Thank you
think
both
that-
so much. Go ahead, Ms. Brusek.
Just one last follow-up. I know our time is kind of short and actually maybe over at this point, but I think to the point made by Mr. Pickens and Ms. Warren is the same issue of, I think over time, the longer a meeting is held where the child voice isn't present, whether because we brought it to the table on behalf of them or because the child isn't there, it can lead to some of those conflicting, awkward moments where people are talking about the student because they haven't been present. And so I think for us too, as working as educators and working is to be more intentional in their work with the students so that we are starting younger to make sure that we are representing the student. If they're not physically present, their voice is being represented as if they were there, so that there are less opportunities for that awkwardness of feeling like you're present, but people are still talking about you rather than asking or seeking guidance and feedback from that individual directly. And I think that will lend itself to them actually feeling like they're an actual member, even though they are, but feeling like they are actually there to have their own voice heard or read or communicated in some way. So again, I think the younger we're able to do that, the less we will do the talking because the student's not present or their voice isn't present. So that would be the last thing I would do, just as far as for us as an awareness and to keep in mind that we do want to represent the student and not talk about them as if they're just something for us to help get better or fix.
Yeah, and if I might add, a lot of it comes down to, like, I'm sure all of us have been a part of a team, whether it's a group project in college or at our workplaces or in our community, or if you play sports or you're involved in a club, whatever it is, you're a part of a team or a community. But we all know what it feels like to be a part of a team, yet not feel like we belong. It's one thing to be physically present, but it's another thing to position ourselves to be receptive and appropriately responsive in light of physical proximity.
Wow, some super powerful statements made this afternoon, a very informative session. I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Gunn for any final words.
Don't know that I can follow Maya. I want to thank our panelists and you, Sheena, for moderating today. This has been probably one of the more powerful sessions we have had. And as always, I'm always learning something new. I have an almost 11-year-old who's in the Exceptional Children's Program, and I'm almost ready for the big T.
You got it. You got it.
Big T transition. At least I know who to call on, right? Thank you all for taking time out of your day for doing this, and till next time.